2 weeks down and 3 to go. Yeah, we've still got a couple more weeks of the mid-season buys. Blue dots everywhere, a couple of red dots, but thankfully still another couple of weeks of best 18 to get you that one step closer towards the end of your fantasy footy season. We've got to talk about hot fixture runs. We've got to talk skimping and savings. We've got to talk about role changes. We've got to talk about how do you know if you're in the mix versus you've just got a little bit of a pipe dream, and all the players jumping on and off the bye. There's a ton of stuff to get through on this week's strategy session. Joining me on this week's episode, as he does every single week, as a part of our stable here at the Coaches Panel, it is MJ and MiniMonk on the podcast for you today. Hello, mate. Nice to see you again.
Good recovery there.
Oh,
you almost got my name as
Mini MJ.
It's a good start to the podcast.
Do we want to go there?
No, it's...
Let's stop.
I don't think we do. We're on video. We're on camera. You can see there's two different people. We're not the same alias. I swear to God. It's
That's
all
true.
good. But no,
this is not AI generated at all. Mate, all right, let's jump in. Two teams have just come off the bye. We have our Saints and our Dockers back into our team, and we're about to lose. And in fact, we have for this week our Magpies, our Suns, our Tigers, our Swans. Look, politely, it's our Magpies that we're really missing this week, isn't it? I know there's some Noah Anderson and some Taranto and some Roberts. You know, Grundy has definitely been amazing over the last 5-6 weeks, to give him some shout for sure. But really, it's the Dacos brothers that are probably, from an ownership perspective across the formats, this is the pain point for us. And it's a relatively comfortable week to navigate. I know we said that last week, and Baz Smith goes and gets a laid out too, so nothing is ever for certain. But with the upgrades we've made over the last couple of weeks, with good buy structure, it shouldn't be too challenging yet again to get to 18, 19, 20 on field.
Have you jinxed it already?
Yeah, man, I'm going all
jinxed
in.
It, haven't you,
I'm going in. I'm all in.
It's all good. Yeah, look, other teams on the bye, I mean, outside of the Dacos boys, Suns, some people will have a piece of Noah Anderson. Maybe some people have got a piece of bit of Rao, bit of potentially a little bit of Dan Rioli or John Noble as well. I've seen a little bit of that floating around. Richmond, maybe some Tim Taranto owners, probably more in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team than in SuperCoach. And then for the Swans, look, maybe you're a Grundy owner, maybe you've gone early on someone like a Mills, or maybe you've held Roberts despite him being ill last week. Those are probably it. But if you look at the dominance and ownership, it's definitely Nick Dacos, a bit of Josh Dacos, a bit of Anderson, but should be a relatively easy buy, which is good. It gives us a bit of time to be able to prep our teams. Hopefully we've got some rookies coming through that, so we can make sure that we're hitting at least that 18, if not 19 or 20 for the last 2 weeks of the bye rounds, and probably most notably the round 16 bye, which is looking to be impendingly difficult with the fact that, you know, we've got Geelong, we've got Essendon, we've got Brisbane, we've got GWS, who have all got relevant players in our teams on that bye. So I suppose what we need to be focusing on as part of the strategy session here is, how do we best prepare ourselves so that we're not in pain for that particular buy round?
It's true. If you've backdated your buy structure and you're just on the upgrade cadence that you're in right now and thinking, oh, this guy I'll get to in 2 weeks, this guy I'll get to in 2 weeks, this guy I'll get to in 2 weeks, man, not only could you be stretched to get to 18 on field, but as coaches over the last fortnight that have only had 18 or 19 on field, you just want those rubbishy scores falling away as quickly as you can. You want the players like the Lomans, the Clarks, or the week prior, the Cleary and Bice types. You just want them falling out of your 18 as quickly as possible in the weekend and not going, oh, gee whiz, I'm going to need Kai Loman to pop an 80 here to save me. These are luxury players, not so much safe best 18 options. And off the back of this, these players that have been making money, that have been doing their job for us, getting us to their bye, there's a player that's gone under the radar's unfair, but probably not going to be the player that when we look at his ownership over the year, people will go, I had him and it was amazing. In the general sense, those that have had good, strong years to date probably have this guy in their team. I'm alluding to a Ned Long. He's been one of the best buyers of the year. An understandable reason coaches were not really jumping on him early in the year, multiple sub-vests in and out of the side, and then all of a sudden, just the right blend lands his way. Combination of some injuries and some strong performances lock him in the side, and he's been outstanding for us. History would say it's time to go Ned Long, based on he's done his job, he's got to the bye, and now jump off. But there is a little bit more money to make, and he's arguably scoring as good as anyone we'd trade into at that M7, M6, M8 spot anyway. So on what situation should we consider holding versus trading out of a Ned Long this week?
I think it's very format dependent. I think in SuperCoach and DT, where you are running down to low numbers of trades, you're looking at Ned Long, you're thinking, he's probably not someone that you want to be running at M8 or at your flex position come the end of the season. He's pretty much going to be at his maximum price this week in those formats, especially because of the way that the pricing cycles work and the 3-week averaging and that massive game against North Melbourne 3 weeks ago. I think it's time for him to go there. And it's been so long. Thank you very much for your service. We'll see you at the postseason trip. AFL Fantasy, it's a bit different. His last 3 weeks have been very strong, obviously. Same in DT, obviously, with the same scoring formats, with 132, 101, 101. 2 of those 3 matchups have been friendly, with North Melbourne and Melbourne being relatively friendlier matchups. And coming out of the bye, he obviously does have St Kilda and West Coast to round out the bye rounds. I would be more inclined to hold him there, purely because it really helps you to make sure that you're getting that 18 that we were talking about off the buys, particularly in that round 16 buy. And he could just be around 17 flip. It's been a bit harder of a season in AFL Fantasy, especially to generate cash as well. And so if he's rocking around in your team and he's sitting at M8, it's not the end of the world. I mean, he's only popped under 80 twice in the last, 9 weeks? And that was a 67 against Freo and a 77 against Adelaide, which are not easy teams to match up against. And there's 4 tons in that mix as well. So if he goes at, let's call it an 85-90 at M8, and you've got him there for 3 or 4 weeks after the buys, I don't think it's the end of the world. And there's every chance that he just snags a score and becomes someone that you're just a bit happy to ride for that little bit longer, and that little bit longer, similar to, 3 or 4 years ago, we had players that popped their heads. Like I remember, I think it was a Closey 2 or 3 years ago that kept popping 85s, 90s. There's no reason to move them on when they're doing that sort of thing. So I think that's how I'd line it up. SuperCoach DT, trade out, maximize the value. AFL Fantasy, if you're really looking for numbers, hang on to him. If you think you're going to have enough numbers, you think you have enough cash generation, then you could probably ship him off.
I was about to ask, because you've mentioned that one of those caveats for reasons to consider holding him isn't just there's a nice couple of matchups after the break, is there are teams that have just fully back-ended the pain with buy structure, which I don't think was a bad ideology. I think that's how I'd play it too. But if you haven't been considering buys and who you're upgrading and when, you might be backdating the pain and going, look, I'm scoring in AFL Fantasy 1900s every single week of the buys, or in SuperCoach, I'm going 2000, 2100 every week of the buy. And you're like, I'm amazing. I'm going up in ranks. But you're about to struggle to get to 16 premiums, let alone 16 on field in that final week of the buys. And all of a sudden it could come crashing down. It does get challenging to me to at least consider, because you're right. But all it takes is him to dish a 75 up this week in AFL Fantasy. Again, the trading variables remaining in SuperCoach and DreamTeam, as you said, are a team-dependent asterisk. But if he drops a 70 when he comes back, which isn't outside of the world of probability with Jordan De Goey likely to come back, then you hit that real hard junction of, I'm trying to get out of my guys from round 16 then have the buy, but I also don't want to lose any of the cash that Ned Long has made. And right now, it's what, like in AFL Fantasy, it's like 60 grand from Long to a Zach Butters. It's like 100 grand, not even, across in SuperCoach and Dream Team. The chance to miss a potential top liner for less than 100K. Oh, it's hard to say no to.
I guess my counterpoint to that is, how likely do we think he drops like a 70 odd is? He's had since round 5, his CBA mix has been 72%, 65%, 53, 54, 65, 67, 78, 71, 54. It's above 50% every single game. Those 3 down weeks all coincided with when Pendlebury was playing. Those 2 earlier on were when Sidey was getting a really heavy midfield mix rotation. And then this week it was Bo McCreary. Now, if you think about Jordan De Goey coming into that team, I think the person who's most likely to take those CBAs off of is probably Bo. I don't think it's going to be coming off of Ned Long because, I mean, we go back to the start of the season. Why everyone was considering picking Harry Perryman is because we thought he's going to be the bodyguard to Nick Dacos. He's going to be allowing him to do his thing. Well, it turns out they already had the bodyguard there ready to go. He was already on the list. His name's Ned Long, and he's doing that job very well. So I don't see him really losing that role. And he's shown that if he has that role, he can score. So, yes, it's very tempting to spend 60K, go up to Zach Butters and call it a day from him. But I think that you should probably explore other options in terms of how you can get to Zach Butters in AFL Fantasy rather than just trading out a player who will give you that number and has a solid role and has a couple of pretty reasonable fixtures off his bye.
Yeah, 100% with you on that. His role is safe as houses. That's not changing. It's going to be a market share of points, if anything, that clips some of that ceiling. But if you need to get him now to get up, knock yourself out. If your buy structure's a little bit out, you should be able to navigate this week okay. Even with some red dots in your bench hygiene, you should still be able to get there. If he is the reason that you're going to get to 16, 17, 18 good scoring options over the subsequent fortnight, hold. This is where team-dependent advice really does land. There were some pretty noticeable changes we've seen in some players and teams over the last couple of weeks. We'll talk about a couple of them, but maybe I want to start with a player that's coming off the bye as opposed to 2 who are heading towards one. And that being a Colby McKercher. Complete role shift. They are moving the magnets down at North Melbourne a lot. We've seen Sheasel go from a centre bounce mid to a high half forward to then playing exclusively half back, then back in the forward pocket. Yuck, that was gross. And then sort of a high half forward extra midfielder in the second half of last week. Daniel's been the distributor. Hardiman's been the distributor. Sheasel's been the distributor. Thankfully, no Fisher. But I want to talk about Colby McKercher. Because last week, exclusively back in defence. First time he's been there all year. Pops a monster SuperCoach score for us and a more than respectable AFL Fantasy score when you consider price versus points output. Man, if he pops for us, if you're jumping off of a player like a Riley Bice, like it's not that far. It's really quite affordable and attainable. And in that role, he's off the... maybe a run or 2 below our top end premium defenders. He's not that far away, but a couple of 100K shorter on it. Can we trust the Roos and this role for Colby McKercher? Because if we can, wow, the value in comparison to output could be one of those season winning moves.
Absolutely, it can. He has clearly got the ability to be able to accumulate a high number of disposals and use it very, very well. We saw that on the weekend. I think he was arguably the best player on ground in that game. Maybe you could argue someone like a Tristan Sherry had a better game than him, but I thought he was fantastic watching that personally. So the question is, do we see that role lasting? And do we see that type of scoring lasting? Now, obviously, that's potentially his season high. It's against West Coast. It's a very friendly matchup. Yes, he played very well, but I don't know if it's something that can hold all the time. I'm just trying to get some very quick stats up here to see the handball receives. It was an anomaly high handball receives. He had 21. Any player that gets over 20 in a game is a big number. But getting 21 is a lot. But if you compare that to the number of handball receives he was getting in the back end of 2024 when he was scoring very well, from round 17 onwards, he went 16, 6, 9, 15, 15, none, 5. So still a reasonable amount, Still a fairly high clip rate, but it's not quite as high as that. The other thing that I found that was really interesting with him is the North Melbourne kick-in numbers. Now, almost the entirety of the season, Caleb Daniel has had the majority of the kick-ins. So the question is, who's been the second fiddle behind him? Most of the season, it's actually been Aiden Core, who's been taking the next kick-in slots. There's been a couple of weeks where Aiden Core has missed. There was 7, 8, 9 where Sheasel went back and he was the second one. And then there was this week where Colby McKercher was the second best kick-in taker. Now, who knows what happens when Aiden Core comes back in, but I think the club in North Melbourne have said they don't want to play Sheasel down back. And I think they really liked what McKercher did down there this week. So I wouldn't be surprised if that holds and he's the second one. So there's an access to, 10 to 15 points a game, depending on how many kick-ins he's getting, depending on how involved he gets in those chains. You just put it all together, you put high handball receives, potential for kick-ins. Yes, it's an anomaly in terms of the score, but that does get the break-even ticking in the right direction. He's already had his bye. There's a lot to really like about it. If you're cash-strapped and you're looking for an option, he is definitely one. The other option is the person that's coming off their bye after this week at a slightly cheaper price than that, which is Callum Mills.
Yeah. That's the hard point, isn't it? Again, depending on where teams are at, and with SuperCoach and Dream Team, you've got flex, you've got that additional spot you can run through there. He does have defensive mid status, McKercher, so that's an aid for you that can open up some loops, whether it be Sinclair that you're looking to loop in, a Sheasel, maybe you're still rocking a Sardell Hawley in your bench, a Tom McCarthy. We know that debut is impending, whether it be this week or subsequent weeks. There's a couple of ways you can skin that maneuver, but I probably personally wouldn't be getting into McKercher if it locked me out of a Callum Mills. Callum didn't play any centre bounce midfield role last week, just gone. It was against Richmond, but you saw exactly what you wanted from Sydney, which was high ball control, Mills getting used through transition and still winning balls under pressurised situations. So I'm okay with McKercher. There is a risk profile to it. Even on the weekend just gone, like we saw them moving the magnets around so much. Hardiman's now out of a distribution role. It's Daniel and it's McKercher. We see Harry Sheasel spend a weird deep forward role in the first quarter, then spend basically the entire first portion of the second quarter and then plays as this high half forward additional midfielder and pops a pretty good score for his owners. So I still think there's some volatility in that Kangaroos team. I hope they lock it down for the next 2 or 3 months to give these kids a go. O'Sullivan looked probably the best I'd seen him play maybe ever in the AFL system. So that would be my only flag around McKercher is yay to go, but if it costs you Mills next week, I wouldn't be a keen. Talk to me about 2 other premiums that have had some pretty sizable role shifts over the last 2 to 3 weeks and your perspectives on them. Zach Merrett, real big role shift, noticeable role shift. And Lachie Whitfield's the other, both drastically out of roles where they've been all-Australian calibre multiple times. And a lot of fantasy coaches looking at that going, what the heck are the coaches doing? And clearly there's some method behind the madness. We're not coaching in the AFL system, so as much as the royal we of fantasy community go, we know better, politely we don't. But what's your take on both of these roles? I understand the ideology behind why the coaches have made these moves. Whether or not we think they're good is another conversation. But is this panic stations for Whitfield and Merrett owners? Because they're not going to get DPP at round 18. They've just not had enough time in these roles in contrast to the season. No. Is it time to panic? Do we back the line? Or will we see a role readjustment back to their primary roles as early as this week?
Well, it's worth asking the question as to why we think these role shifts have happened. And to purely say that it's coaches shifting their magnets because they want to try and see what different things can happen, I think is missing the point with both of these players. I think they've had to role shift these 2 players out of necessity more than anything. Essendon have an abundance of midfielders that they want to actually try and rotate through there, and they are so depleted in their halfback stocks. They just don't have players that they can rotate through there that know how to use it well enough that can actually do the role that's required of them. And we've just seen it. There's another injury that's come through with them with Redmond out for 3 weeks now. So if any of those two is going to stick, I think that it's pretty clear that they want to keep using Merrett off of halfback. And I might get some call out from some Essendon fans who I have quite conversations with, but I think that this is genuinely a case where they will use him there potentially for the rest of the season, or at least until the troops are back. Lachie Whitfield is the different one though, and he's a bit of a trickier one to try and pin down. It's a similar sort of idea where they have Ash. They also have players like Iden and Himmelberg who can distribute off halfback quite well. And people are saying Ash has just chewed into the role. It's completely killed Whitfield. I don't think that that's true at all, because we saw that those two could coexist earlier on in the season. I think that this is GWS maybe trying to get a bit tricky and use Whitfield very similar to how Essendon used Martin, and say, you're coming off half forward and then you're pushing back and being the one who's being able to find the ball, and use it as transition sort of play. And that they just don't have anyone else that can really do that sort of role for them. I mean, Cornelia was a player that was able to do a very similar sort of connecting role, and I don't know if we'll see him again this season based off of all the reports that keep coming out of him. He keeps being TBC on the injury reports. Callan Ward's out as well, who is another one of those classier users who was able to transition it back a lot. Callahan, I expect he'll probably just go straight into that CVAs, even if when he's back this week, or if he's back this week. So I think we see both of these roles persist for both players. I think they can both score well
in them,
but I don't think they can score at, as a top 6 defender for Whitfield and as a top 8 midfielder for Merrett in these particular roles. And so if I had either of those players, I'd probably be looking to, try and ship them on. I think probably at their bye, given we want to try and maximize numbers, and I don't really see them dropping an absolute stinker, but I think it is enough cause for me to be concerned on those two players.
Yeah, I think so too. Maybe the safety net for Whitfield is Brent Daniels came back this week, who is that kind of high half forward that they've used. He came in with the sub this week. Again, Toby Green out probably didn't help that from a structural piece. That's probably the only thread that if you're a Giants or a Whitfield owner, you're going, hang on, Daniels is back, Callahan's close. All right, Toby Green, Daniels, McMullen, these kind of guys, that can get the high half forward, the skill set up. They might throw him back there. Those are the kind of threads that you're kind of hoping for. It is probably more in the territory of luxury moves for SuperCoach and Dream Team. That's the concern. AFL Fantasy, it's a little bit different. We're going to get to the sort of the round 16 bye, and most teams, as they enter into round 18, should be, quote unquote, happy with a completed side. And I use that as a quote unquote. Most teams should be heading into round 18 there. Some might not be. It'll include a Mills type to say it's quote unquote complete. I understand that, but they've got rid of the mid prices. They've got rid of the cash cows off the field. So we're still a month away from that period of time. That's still 10 trades away? That's a lot of trades in AFL Fantasy. It's a lot of moves. I think you can make that move in one of those two formats. Last couple of things I want to ask you before we wrap up the pod. I know it sounds weird 23 minutes into the pod to go wrap it up, but it's still good 10, 15 minutes of conversation I want to have. There's a team that has an unbelievable 3 weeks, like an unbelievable 3 weeks on paper. Now, we shouldn't just be looking for a short-term gain. We should always be future-focused. We can get stuck with players at this point in the year. But if ever there was a broad-bent fixture that was screaming at us, it is what Carlton have over the next 3 weeks. They've got West Coast, they've got North Melbourne, and definitely for forwards, this one helps, but certainly it's decent in the ruck line as well. They've got Port Adelaide. Should we be targeting these Carlton players? Because they had a great week last week, tons across the formats in like 6 or 7 players. And it's just as good.
It's even good for. I was going to say, it's even good for inside mids as well. You look at that, people might say Port Adelaide's a bit tricky, but we saw what Tom Green did on the weekend, and he looked, fantastic in that sort of a sense. I think that we really should be considering Carlton players. There's people that are considering a Sam Doherty. I don't mind the Doherty play. It comes with a lot of risk. We saw him become the sub earlier on in the year. We've seen him being able to rack up, but it's just a week-to-week proposition as to, what he's going to do. We've seen him in and out of the team. I think that there's a play there with Doherty. I think there's a play there if you don't own Tom de Koning. I think in SuperCoach, he's definitely someone you can consider trading into. People might be concerned. I mean, I got a bit spooked by someone like a Hudson O'Keefe coming in, but they played him as a forward. He didn't play as a ruck.
It's not happening. I'm not worried about pitting at one piece this year. I'm just not.
No, I don't think so either. I think the fact that they showed that they wanted to bring O'Keefe in and play him forward rather than bring Pitnett in and play Tom de Koning forward shows you where Carlton lie with their ruck stocks. But I think the two most interesting ones actually lie in our forward lines.
I agree.
I'll start with the one that's the less spicy one, which is Lord.
We're just going, is this lemon and herb or is this mild? Give me a meter.
Say that this
Come on,
is
Nando's.
mild.
Okay, mild. All right.
I'm going to say this is mild. He's shown himself to be a very capable winger for Carlton and has scored in the 70s and 80s for the last 4 weeks and has locked down a spot. And I think that they've really started to find out how they want to settle him into the team and settle in that 22 a bit more as well. I think the fixture is there, and I think it gives you 3 weeks to wait on someone like a Jason Horne-Francis to come down in price, to see how a McRae comes back from his injury, to see how players like, a Matt Kennedy, a Luke Jackson settle in and actually be able to score, especially with the fact that he's already had his bye. And so I don't mind him as a pick, and I think that price tag, there's not a lot that can go wrong.
And when you say
but
him,
I think the really...
Say his name. Who are you talking to?
Lord.
No. Don't.
I think the one that's...
Thank you. Everyone else is thinking, are you talking about Elijah Hollins here? No. It's Cooper Lord.
I thought I mentioned that it was Cooper
I just wanted to make sure people knew who you were heading down the track of before they're like, oh, Mini could be selling me into Elijah Hollins here. No, it's Cooper Lord. I love that call. It's mild, but go full, Homer Simpson, biggest, hottest chili you can give me in the forward lines.
This is the really fun one. This is seriously fun because I looked at it before the bye even happened, and I thought this could be really fun.
I love this.
It's Charlie Curnow.
Get it. Go, Charlie.
With a 3-week fixture of West Coast, North Melbourne, and Port Adelaide, which is it's 3 of the 4 easiest matchups for key forwards.
Yeah.
And if you ever are talking about a spearhead key forward for a club that is dominant, there's 3 players that probably come to mind. That's Jeremy Cameron, Jesse Hogan, and Charlie Curnow. And we've seen teams target players like Jeremy Cameron and players like Jesse Hogan when they've had 3-week fixture blocks in AFL Fantasy to great success. I think it was a couple of years ago, Jesse Hogan was a phenomenal starting pick and he made about 150k in 4 weeks in SuperCoach. Jeremy Cameron, we've all known when he went 120 odd and won someone the car in AFL Fantasy a few years back. The other thing that I really like about Charlie Curnow is that his floor is almost safe as houses. Since round 5, his lowest score is a 70. And that's against GWS, who have the Twin Towers in Sam Taylor and,
Buckley.
Their other key defender, I'm blanking so hard right now. Jack Buckley.
Himmelberg. I'll just say them all.
Iden as well. I mean, they've got defenses through the wazoo. But you look at it and you think, who do West Coast have that's going to line up against him? They don't have McGovern. So is it going to be Sandy Brock lining up against him?
He's been solid.
I'd be pretty happy with that. He's been solid. But here's the juice. North Melbourne have actually just lost their premier intercepting defender who would probably be taking the Curnow matchup for 3 weeks. Charlie Comben is out. It just makes it even more of a nice one to target. And then Port Adelaide have always been leaking goals to key forwards. I just think if you're looking for someone to fully broadbent, to go hard for 3 weeks, to give yourself some time to figure out what is going on in the forward line and to pick up the premium that you want to, there's every chance that Curnow can average 100 and make 100k in AFL Fantasy. I seriously think that this is a viable strategy. It's not for the faint-hearted, but it looks like a really fun one.
It feels very AFL Fantasy only to me. I can see the appeal in SuperCoach and Dream Team, but it's very AFL Fantasy. The basement's fine, but if you get stuck at that at F6 out of this 3-week period, like we've got 11 weeks left to go in the year, If you get stuck with that at F6 for 6 or 7 weeks after this week one, yikes. This year is not going to go end nicely for you. History can prove me wrong otherwise, and I'll happily be proven wrong, and that's happened many times in my life. Hey, last 2 things I want to ask you. We are 11 weeks left to go in the year, and it is this weird junction of the year because kind of entering into the buys, we have a miniature pulse check of where our team is at in comparison to being in contention to win either the cash prize or the card, depending on the format you're in, getting some other kind of secondary prizes. And then we're in this weird 5-week block where you just truly don't know what team have built with bench hygiene, trades remaining in SuperCoach and Dream Team, are people sideways. We just don't know what this 5-week, and then we'll get out of round 17 and we'll be like, okay, now we've got a bit of clear air to see. But in this weird spot of the year with 11 weeks left to go, which is a long time left to go in the year, how far away is too far away from a points per week chasing on the overall leader? Again, there's all those variables that I've just listed, so I may be setting you up for failure a little bit there. But what's an indicator as you're looking at your total points versus kind of the top 5, 10, 15, 20 teams overall? What to you is a feasible task to chase behind them from where you are? Have you got a best guesstimate of what's close to the pin to still be in the mix?
The old adage used to be that you can chase about 100 points a week. I don't think that that's as true as it used to be. I think that there's coaching, the quality of coaching has gotten a lot better. And I think chasing 100 points a week in this age is very hard. If you look at AFL Fantasy, for example, the difference between the first team and the 100th team is about 400 points. You'd say that's about 4 weeks. I'd say it'd be very tricky. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I'd say it'd be very tricky for a coach probably outside of the top 200 in AFL Fantasy to win it from here, unless they had an amazing team value and just nailed every trade. But if you're in the top probably nearly 2,000, you had a really strong team in AFL Fantasy, I still think you could be a chance for a hat. Like genuinely in the hunt still. And then I think in SuperCoach, it's a bit more deceiving because it's all going to depend on how much carnage hits in the back half of the season, how many trades you have, and how many trades the coaches around you have. But if you're ahead on trades and you're coming home like a steam train with carnage coming through, I genuinely think you could probably win it from about 250, 300, maybe even 400 at this point of the season. But you'd have to be having, you'd want to have all the premiums and you're just got to pray that the carnage comes. If the carnage doesn't come, it's probably somewhere inside the top 200 like it is with AFL Fantasy.
Yeah, I agree. Like, if you're doing that well in that high ownership perspective, 9 times out of 10, they've probably got that player too that's got you there. There's always uniquenesses that sit in every team and you do need that to win it for you. But it's where those decision makings of, are you going to take that risky VC? Are you going to put it on the Holmes with a Bailey Smith going out? Or are you going to play it safe with something else? Like, these are the sort of moves you get to make. To me, this next sort of 5-week block is super hard to get a read on because you have teams, even in the top 100 or so, looking at AFL Fantasy, there's almost 1 million team value range differential in some of these teams, which is wild. That's a full premium difference because, again, people are just spinning the magnets and they're not building their team effectively and efficiently. Whereas, as you mentioned in SuperCoach and Dream Team, well, trades in the bank, in contrast to upgrades remaining, become equally as valuable at this junction in the year. So it is hard. I'm with you. I've evolved over the last few years. I think anything more than 100 points a week in AFL Fantasy, you're too far gone. It's closer to 50 to 75 now on average in AFL Fantasy. Dream Team and SuperCoach, a bit more variance. You could get upwards of 150 with some luck, but you really want to be within that sort of 75 to 50 a week to give yourself a chance. And then you need something to create separation. On SuperCoach and Dream Team, maybe we'll end talking about those two formats. And it was highlighted a little bit last week. I know we unpacked it, but I think it's worth circling back to again this week because it still sits true, is because of the second wave of our rookies really stalled for us. Like outside of Bice, there really hasn't been a cash cow that's flooded through in the second wave that's made us good money. Cleary's been solid. I think he deserves a shout out. It kind of teeped it off at the back. We just haven't had that second win of rookies that come through. Bustlinger stalled. Hayes got injured. El Hawley got dropped and got injured. Gross and Hall have both gone wholly gross. It's just a lot of those guys have just stalled for us in that second wind. And so as a result, our cash generation and the ability to get into the premiums we want is there. And if we have just scrimped every 50 to 100K we can, we're really, really low on trades. So I guess my question I want to ask you is, should we be skimping just to get to a completed team of guys that we believe are premium-ish? Or are we happy to just manage that 23rd spot on field with the best rook we got? So an example of last week was Bont at his peak or near peak price, or drop a couple 100K to go down to a Caldwell in SuperCoach was the illustration. Where do you sit on that? Are you a sum of all parts, make up the whole, or do you still think if you're going to win it all, you need the best in the business?
I think it's a combination of both. I think you probably want to have 20 out of your 23 spots on field filled with players that you are thinking at, top 10 mid, top 8 forward defender, top 3 ruckman sort of vibes. With the ruckmans, players like Gorn, even if you end up with like an English, a TDK type Marshall, of player, even a Marshall as your R2, you're probably not complaining too much. I wouldn't want my 23rd spot to be a rookie though, because it doesn't help you. You don't know if your rookie's going to be dropped. You don't know if your rookie's going to be named even sometimes. You don't even know if they're going to be able to put up a score that'll cover if you get a premium that's a laid out or anything. I think if you can get to 20 players that are good enough, and then you're riding maybe 2 or 3 players that are the likes of, let's say it's a Ranked who's fallen off a little bit in the last few weeks. Yeah, let's say it's someone like a Mills. Let's say it's a Bergman. Let's say it's a
Long. Gosh, dare I say
even someone like a Cozzy Pickett, these sorts of players that have on any given week the ability to pop a score. Having a couple of those and praying that 2 out of 3 of those will hit. That's the way I'd want to play it. So I think you can afford to skip on the very last upgrades. Yeah, I think Chera's fine. I'd have Chera close enough to it. He's been fine this season. Yeah. That I think that's the way that I would view it, and that's the way that I'd want to be attacking DT and SC with my last couple of trades. Yeah.
Yeah, some good advice. Hey, mate, always a pleasure. I know you're super helpful and reflective to help us make those important, critical mid-season buy trades, regardless of the format. It's always a pleasure talking fantasy footy with you. We'll be back again next week as we kind of tip over into the back half of the buys and the back half of the season.
It'll be fun. I cannot wait.
Looking forward to it. If you want to check out any of the episodes we've dropped right throughout this, not only this week, but this season, you can go and watch them on YouTube. If you haven't liked this video or subscribed to the channel, make sure you do both of those things. Our AFL Fantasy trade targets are already out. We dropped them early on a Tuesday afternoon. Wednesday night, we will drop the SuperCoach top 10 trade targets. You can listen to this as an audio podcast as well. There, you can make sure, if you haven't already also done so, give us a 5-star rating and a review. We would so greatly appreciate it. Inside the description of this episode is where you can get in touch with us across social media, gain access to our Patreon. They get extra content, access to some hidden groups, conversations with us here at the panel, and a whole lot more. Plus, you're supporting CP, so we greatly appreciate if you would do that. If you want to get in touch with us, so everything you need for everything you want is all in the description of this episode. As you head into this next week of Best 18, we do wish you all the best. We hope you nail that VC early on in the week, and whatever premium upgrades you make, they give you a season high score. Until we talk to you again, we wish you good luck, and we'll chat to you soon.